You see these little chevrons right here, all along the backside of this sock? Those are called turbulators. That's a real word, by the way, and we'll discuss that later. It's not made up. This is the Silka Aero sock. Silka says that these little chevrons, these little turbulators, actually make you more aerodynamic, that this sock will actually make you faster. Now, is that fast or is that fiction? Let's find out. Now, before we get into this, we first need to discuss how air flows over the human body. And to do that, we're actually going to talk about how air flows over a golf ball. As most people know, golf balls have little dimples just all around them. Why is that? Well, that's to make the ball more aerodynamic so it will fly faster. How does that relate to the turbulators? Let me show you how this works. Okay, so as it turns out, other than a flat plate, a cylinder is about the worst shape you can present to the wind. And unfortunately for us humans, we are just a bunch of cylinders. Our head, our arms, our torso, our legs, we're just a bunch of cylinders that the air doesn't like to pass through. Or at least we pass through it more slowly. And so we're going to learn from the golf ball how to make that air flow over us better so we get more aerodynamic. Let's take a look at actually how dimples on a golf ball work. So let's first take a look at a golf ball without dimples. As the air flows over that ball, right at the widest point, it wants to separate. And it does separate, leaving a huge wake behind it, which is really a low pressure area behind the ball. And that low pressure area literally just pulls back on that ball, slows it down and takes it right out of the air. Well, the same thing can happen to the human body. As the air travels around our arms or our head or our torso, it wants to separate at the widest part, and behind it, it leaves a wake. And that wake is a low pressure area that's giant and literally just slows us down. So golf balls use dimples. Dimples actually create turbulence. So as it travels through the air, now the air flowing over that ball becomes more turbulent. And it actually becomes more sticky, and that air kind of holds onto the ball longer, and it waits, and the separation is delayed. And so now once it separates from the ball, that low pressure area behind the ball is now much smaller. And so what turbulators are supposed to do, what the ribbing on our skin suits, our tri-suits, on calf sleeves, what those things are trying to do is create turbulent air so that air sticks to our bodies better, and in so doing creates less low pressure behind us. Really, we're choosing between the lesser of two evils. We're creating friction drag by creating that turbulence, so we decrease the pressure drag, which is much, much worse than friction drag. Got it? Now let's see if these turbulators actually work. Okay, so as usual, when we test a product, we used multiple athletes, both men and women, to get our results. We test outdoors using the Aerolab AeroPro sensor that we are incredibly confident in, as is the rest of the world now. And that gives us amazing results and gives us a drag number based on real world riding. And that's really the key for us in giving you accurate numbers, is what happens in the real world. Okay, so let's get right to it, because quite frankly, I thought at best this might work for half the riders. And then the other half, it would either be a wash or it really wouldn't be any better. So two things and two reasons for that. One, I've had a lot of experience testing aero socks over the years, and I just haven't seen a lot of consistency, to be honest with you. It's a very difficult area to make more aero. Keep in mind what's going on here. You're churning your pedals. Your feet are changing angles. There's a lot going on with the air as you pedal, and it's just a very difficult area to make more aerodynamic. And so, yeah, I just didn't have a lot of high hopes. I didn't think it was a bad product at all. I just thought, maybe it'd work on some people and maybe it wouldn't. And the results started coming in and it kind of got interesting, right? So let's cover the athletes. We've got 3 men, 2 women, and then we've got a special guest star at the end. We'll call it a guest star. Okay, so let's start with Ida. Ida is a competitive female triathlete, and she is the only athlete amongst this group that already uses the Silka Aero socks. So she already has them, and in fact, she competed with them at 70.3 Honu this past June and had some great feedback for us. So we'll get to that towards the end. But for Ida, she normally wears no socks or ankle socks. So no socks that are exposed to the outside air. And when she slipped on the Silka Aero socks, she saw a 1.44% drop in drag. And for her, at her race wattage, that equals 2.3 watts. Just for putting on a pair of socks, her drag dropped 2.3 watts. That's pretty darn good, to be honest with you, just for a pair of socks. So good for her. Next, we have David. David, again, competitive male triathlete. David is a smaller rider who weighs all of 130 pounds, I think. He normally wears tall cycling socks that go up quite high on his shin or his lower leg. And so I thought this one was kind of interesting because I think those socks are probably likely supposed to have aero properties, so already probably working for him a little bit. And yet when he slipped the Silka socks on, he saw about a 1% drop in drag, which for him at his race wattage is 2.8 watts. So just over 1%, and 2.8 watts for him. And his immediate response was, I'll take it, for I'm putting socks on anyways. And now I have almost 3 watts of savings. Yeah, he'll take it. So good for him. Next, we move on to Tony. Tony is probably our most recognizable test athlete. He's always out there for us. He is our most meticulous and consistent test athlete. So I do give a lot of weight to his numbers. Tony saw a huge drop in drag from these socks. Tony normally wears ankle type socks and really doesn't want to wear socks that go above his ankles because he doesn't want to run in them. But when he slipped on the Silkas, that was a 2.38% drop in drag for him. For him, that was 6.5 watts at his race pace, right? So that is a massive drop in drag for sliding on aero socks. And Tony's about 6 foot tall. We're going to get back to that in a second. And why would he see such a big drop in drag versus the others who all saw kind of similar drops in drag otherwise, except for our little guest rider who also saw a massive drop in drag, which we'll get to in a moment. So, but for Tony, 6.5 watts. 2.38%. I really want to get away from talking watts. So 2.38%, that is a very good, beyond marginal gain. That is what we would refer to as a moderate gain. To me, anything above 2% is a moderate gain. That is a very significant gain for any athlete. So good for him. Now, it didn't work for everybody, and few things do. So our second female is Annie, who's also competitive. They're all competitive triathletes. And so Annie, when she put on the Silka socks, they actually really effectively made no difference for her. There was a slight less than 0.5% increase in drag between her 2 tests. That's not something we're going to pay attention to. It's less than 1 watt, probably within the margin of error. So for her, they just made no difference. Didn't make her worse, didn't make her better, just no difference at all. And that happens sometimes. Even things that seemingly work on everybody, every now and then they'll be an outlier. And then she's not the only person we've tested over time that the socks or calf sleeves for that matter won't work for. Sometimes they just don't work on certain people. But for her in this test, she was the only one of our test athletes that it really didn't work for. But again, didn't hurt her either. So no problem there. Adam is our final male test rider, and he saw a 1.33% drop in drag, so kind of along the same lines as everybody else. At his race pace, that's a 2.7 watt drop in drag. So all these athletes are getting, free watts out of just sliding socks on their feet. And so why would you say no to that unless you just really don't want to wear socks? So really good. We'll get into how they go on, their comfort and all that in just a second. We do have a guest rider. Okay, this is a handsome man. We're only gonna show you this rider's leg because this rider is me, and we've got other things going on with me right now. For instance, when I tested the Silka Aero socks, I was 20 pounds heavier than I am today. So for those of you who've been around a long time with me online on Slow Twitch or whatever, you know I've been wanting to test certain things regards to weight. Well, that is ongoing right now. And so we're going to hold off showing you too much of me because we want a really cool before and after. But when I tested them, I weighed quite a bit more and my legs were not shaven. And so as you can see from the photo here, so I saw a significant drop in drag of 2.36%, very close to what Tony saw. And for me, at my current race wattage, or what the wattage I was testing at, which for me is weak at the moment because I'm out of shape. What can I say? But it's still a 5.7 watt drag savings just for sliding on socks. Pretty amazing. And I wondered if part of that was because I was covering some of the hair in my legs, and that's why I may have seen a nice big drop in drag. The other interesting fact about my test versus the others is while everybody else was between 2 and 4 degrees of yaw average throughout their test, I was up near 7 degrees yaw. I was on a different course with much more crosswind. So yaw is the crosswind, the side wind that you're experiencing. Mine was much higher than everybody else's, so it could have had something to do with my more significant gains. If we really wanted to dig into it, we would test in a low and high yaw environment and see what happens. But anyways, I did see a significant drop in drag. The other factor could be that Tony's, he's a very in shape athlete, but he's about 6 foot tall, maybe a little taller. I am 6'2". Our legs are proportional to our size, so are we leaving a bigger wake behind our legs? And because we leave a bigger wake, does reducing that wake with the turbulators actually give us a bigger savings? It's very possible there that we get an advantage from that from our disadvantage of being bigger. I don't know. It's just speculation on my part. I have no data to prove that whatsoever. It was just a thought that kind of ran through my head. But as you can see, virtually everybody saw some sort of drag savings. And again, I've tested others, some who saw some who didn't. By far, the majority of people are seeing drag savings. And so it's actually quite an impressive sock. The other thing you'll hear about this sock all the time is how comfortable it is. And I will be honest with you, I am not picky about equipment. I've never been, for instance, picky about the saddles I ride. Just whatever's underneath or on that bike and underneath me, I ride it. I'm not picky about my kid. I'm just not. I just ride what I ride, and I don't really care. I was kind of surprised at how comfortable these socks were. Going back, by the way, I normally wear a tall, thin cycling sock, so that's what I was comparing against, by the way. And probably one of the biggest brands of socks out there, and so that's what my comparison was to. So I was already covering my hair with that sock, by the way. So anyway, we'll cover that another time. I found them incredibly comfortable, and I swear, before I even knew the numbers, I did feel like the air flowed differently around my lower leg. I couldn't explain it, but as I went back and forth, I felt like I could tell the difference. And so for whatever that's worth, it could just be in my head, I don't know, but they certainly seem to be very comfortable socks. Now, you'll also hear that they're very comfortable to run in. And I thought that was really interesting because, again, going back to Ida, who's actually competed in these socks, she rode and ran with them at 70.3 Honu this past June. And here's what she had to say about these socks. Okay, Ida, so after aero testing the Silka Aero socks, you found out they saved you a few watts.
Yes.
So what do you think about them? Would you use them?
Absolutely. So, first of all, the colors, amazing. It goes in my kit, and they have so many different colors. And what I like the best is they're super easy to put on. So in transition, you're not, struggling trying to get them on. And the best part is running. I don't feel that the shoe is moving around. So before I've had an issue with like cycling socks, where when I was running, I've had blisters from my foot moving around too much, but I don't feel that in these socks. So I think that it just works going from the bike to the run without having any issues on the run.
Okay, and thank you to Ida for that input. And we are going to get into reviewing products a little more as we test them as well. These are, These test riders are athletes just like you. They're normal, everyday triathletes. They're not professionals. They're not being paid to say anything. They're not sponsored, and if ever they are sponsored, they will not be involved in anything testing anything that they're sponsored with. So, anyways, we want them to tell you what they think because they are you, and so we'll get into that more. So, but again, you can ride in them, you can run in them. They're comfortable. My final verdict is they're now my daily driver. I'm just going to wear them all the time now. Why not? They make me faster. What's not to love about these things? So they're $30. You go faster. They're comfortable. Have at it, guys. So there you go. That's our Silka Aero sock test. I will say this. Originally, we were supposed to be comparing one brand of sock versus the other. In fact, it was the Silka Aero sock against the Rule 28 Aero sock, which is much more of a time trial sock. Early on, it became very clear to us that these two socks tested virtually identical to one another in our early testing. And so as I thought about that, right now our audience is primarily triathletes. We really do want to broaden that audience, but for the most part, you are triathletes out there watching this. And I know that there's no way in transition you're putting Rule 28 socks on because it just takes way too long, and any time savings you would have gained are long gone. Where the Silka socks just are socks. They just slide on. If anything, they seem even easier to slide on than normal socks. It's so bizarre. They're not super tight or anything, but they fit you well. And so that's a much more realistic sock to use in triathlon than Rule 28. And so I just suddenly realized there's really no reason to compare two socks that tested the same with one sock that while very nice and very useful and will also save you drag, you're not going to put on in transition one. You're going to put the Silkas on. So that's why we worked away from that. And you'll see something interesting happen in our calf sleeves video, which comes next, that we also found interesting in comparing different brands. So that's why you don't see that. So otherwise, we do want to thank you for watching. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We've really received good reaction from our videos, from you and from the industry, and we're going to keep doing it as long as you encourage us to do it. And the way you encourage us is by subscribing and liking. If you're still here, bless your heart. Our next video is calf sleeves. It will not be out next week, but likely the week after. And then we got some really interesting tests coming after that as well. We're going to have a lot of fun with this. So stay tuned. We're going to have fun. All right, go out there and be fast and be aero, and we will see you soon.